hope everyone is fit and fine. Myself, Happy Shah, and I will be the moderator for this breakout room. Before we start the presentation, I would like to give a few instructions to ensure all our guests and presenters have a positive and educational experience. We ask anyone who is not presenting to keep their mics and camera off during the presentation to avoid the unnecessary distraction. If you have any questions, type it in the chat box and we will go through them at the end of our Q&A session. All the presenters are requested to stay within their allotted 15 minutes. When time is due, I will ask the presenter to conclude their presentation so we can move on to the next one. Lastly, I would just like to remind everyone that the session is being recorded. Thank you. Now I will pass it on to our first presenter, Mr. Christine Martins.
Okay, I'm here.
Hello.
Yes, I can. I can just share my PowerPoint slides.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. You can see the screen of PowerPoint?
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. When I'm supposed to start, please just say.
Yeah, you can start now, ma'am.
I can start now? Can I?
Yeah, you can start. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, hello everyone. Good afternoon. I'm 1 hour after yours, and I'm very happy to be here and attend this international symposium talking about our experience in learning and development in higher education through extension actions. My presentations brings an experience that I have been developing at the Federal University of Pernambuco in Brazil through the SABE Research Group. My name is Christine, and I'm an associate professor at the Federal University of Pernambuco. So I don't know if many of you know that Brazil is in the South America, and we here in a coastal city named Recife, and it is very hot and humid here. In fact, this afternoon we have some rain just because we are in a rain season. So I'm professor at the Department of Biomedical Engineering, and this initiative has the participation of undergraduate students. The carrying out of activities and actions that happens to be in the undergraduate, we have the main idea to promote professional development through extension actions. And so we create the Plus Saberes project that has the main objectives, main goals to work with digital competencies, make some transformations about professional practice, and stimulating biomedical engineering investigations. So we started to change the students' place, and they start to have some problems, some issues to solve, and to take some actions about that. The Mais Saberes project, born with the purpose of working on digital competences, stimulating the development of open materials and content. The undergraduate course in our institution has 306 hours in its curriculum to work on extensions. And this is very interesting to our students, that they are always looking for some complementary contents and activities that may evaluate their knowledge. So these hours are used to complete development of skills of many areas of interest. When we think about this project, we are focused on flexible learning, virtual scenarios, technological innovation, and especially social inclusion. This project born last year during the pandemic time as well. And we use the project-based learning as a main methodology. Our methodology, as we are working with extension project, we enrolled students, and for this project we have 16 students enrolled. We did some meetings, and in these meetings we explained the project. We made a kickoff, we present some concepts, and we have some discussions. And then we start the planning to solve the main requirements. And in the planning, we describe the goals and the milestone for this. And we have some outcomes about the first edition of this project. And the main outcomes was virtual sections, keynotes, white papers, and reports about the questions and answers in these virtual sections. Then we start the process to do so. And these 16 students are put into the groups, 4 of each student, and they started to work as a group and choose thematic research area, choose keynotes and the area related to these keynotes, made the invitations, starts to write scientific communication and then the white paper, and did the virtual sections, interviewing the keynote in the end and reporting the questions and answers in these sections. The main outcomes for this first editions was 32 pages of white papers, reminding that all these products are open, 8 virtual sections with 1 hour each, so 8 hours of virtual sections. Unfortunately, all these sections is in Portuguese, and 8 reports about that what was discussed in each sections. This project gives us many ideas about any other actions with our students, just because they have to deal with a process, a managed process, to relate the execution of each sections and the develop of each material content. We have now ongoing activities is related to the second edition of these projects. We have the same number of students, but now the actions that they are developed is not only virtual sections, but the virtual sections and the made of podcasts. So all the keynotes and other keynotes are invited to discuss thematic areas about biomedical engineering, technological innovations, and health education. And in the end, we have an interview, and a podcast is developed and launched to our community. And with the podcast, we have the attendance scripts to give them an idea to our interviewer what is the podcast. We have some key lessons with this experience. The first of all is the expanding role of online learning. So we are trying to understand better, to have a better understanding of the educational process, the professional educational process of our students, and more comprehensive student assessment that we can personalize this process of education. The second is the adoptions of new innovations and digital inclusions. We are really living in a digital era, and it's important that our students, new professions, knows how to work with this set of new tools and the effective need of technology in their professional lives, and provide instructions tailored to these students and to our teachers also, just because many of us don't know and don't know how to use better the technological, but even so, the pedagogy associated to this new classroom workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. If any of the attendees have any doubt, then you can ask them.
Sorry?
If any of the attendees has any doubt, then they can ask them.
Okay. I want to know if anyone has doubts about what I'm presented now, and if don't, we can wait until to the end to ask questions, and I will be very happy to discuss with you. Thank you.
Yeah, so we can wait for the end of the session for any questions. So now we move on to the next one. Mr. Quinton Sharif.
Hi, how are you, Happy?
Hi, sir. Yeah.
Hi. Awesome. Thank you very much. I am going to... Oops, where are we? All right. Could I ask if everyone can see the screen?
Yeah, we can see that. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. So my name is Quinton Sharif, and I'm currently studying in Montreal in Canada. I did a master's in international education, and I worked in South Africa, China, Thailand, Peru, and then I came to Canada. And I'm doing another master's degree in instructional technology, and I'm in Concordia in Montreal. And I'm finding it really interesting with the pandemic and with my previous experience. So as part of my studies, I'm looking specifically at motivation and engagement. And I thought I would put my experience and my current research together to present this presentation on improving class student motivation in online discussion environments. So let's just think about engagement and motivation. It's so easy to start a New Year's resolution, but to keep it going to the end of the year is a tough thing. And keeping going at gyms is also tough. 60% of gym memberships are never used. So to combat this, I am going to look at an overview of theory and research, examining barriers to engagement, and then looking specifically at our audience here, how to cater for culturally and linguistically diverse student audiences. And I'm looking at the keywords like online learning environments, teacher online feedback, learning motivation and engagement, instructional design, e-learning groups, and online discussions. So let's focus a little bit more on education. The first quote was taken from 2018, before the pandemic. So we can imagine that now, degree granting institutions, there's more than 70% that are moving in this direction. And the second quote is from Clarence Ng, who looked at 4 decades of research in distance education and found regarding research themes, dropout and persistence have been a perennial concern. So looking at the 3 levels of research that I've overlaid, I've got self-determination on the left, looking at supportive influences from the teacher's point of view, the learning activity, and the peers. I'm overlaying distributed motivation from Clarence Ng's 4 decades of research, and he looks at sources of motivation from subject, object, outcomes, tools, interactions, rules, the community, and the division of labor. And then I'm looking at the book Motivation in Online Education by Maggie Hartnett. So let's split this into 3 different groups. First of all, teachers. Let's think of the outcomes that you as the teacher value. Are the learning materials motivating? And are the assignments interesting, personally relevant, and offering an appropriate challenge? To dig a little bit deeper, offer lots of flexible communication possibilities. Offer ways for learners to access and use the learning content, advertise your updates and changes, consider extra resources that the institution provides, such as librarians or possible free software. Check in with your learners at times during the course, especially more towards the beginning. And then take learner feedback with polls and surveys into account and adjust your materials as needed. If we look at further applying this, you can write the expected engagement into your class and make sure it's assessed. Consider some online synchronous sessions. Work to building a rapport and a relationship with your community and your learners. Interestingly, student moderator groups often perform better than instructor moderated groups, so feel free to delegate discussion groups to your students. And guidelines like rubrics, examples, models for learners to evaluate help. And see if you can pair discussions and demonstrations, purposeful questioning, and clicker quizzes to promote lower order cognition. If we move on to our second group, which is our course designers, our instructional designers, questions they can ask are the online forums facilitating interaction and exchange? Is the content interesting? Is there tech support available? What's the focus of the interaction, and how does this support motivation? So digging a bit deeper, it's about offering a variety of supports. If the learner knows that there are short and long options, or there's a variety of media possibilities, they can go towards their strengths, or they can try something new. Consider the availability of resources for international students and try to provide open source or free options. And consider the internet access and speed available. In my current courses, we've had learners joining us from India, China, Taiwan, working at different time zones. And consider these learners and what's on their plates. You can try out a new activity and do a practice run with an assistant or a practice group. You can go through your courses and make a list of materials that need updating. And ask yourself if all learners will be able to proceed without any extra information or support or content standardization. Going further into applying this, make sure that your content's accessible and check everything's working. Consider oral, video, visual responses, so media possibilities instead of just text-based work. Divide discussion topics across participation groups. Offer multiple choice or different types of questions, and give scenarios that learners can interact with. Let's move on to the learners. Their overall questions are, what do they want as an outcome? What do our learners intend to achieve? What are their goals, interests, and need? And do they have the required knowledge and skills? For learners who want to work on engagement and motivation, reach out to your community. There are, if you have access to each other during the course and you create a community of learners, you can make connections with the group and support each other. And you can also try practice activities with your community before bringing them back to the class for formal assessments or summative assessments. If we go further into applying this, allow different roles for group work. Expect some disruptions. The pandemic has caused a bit of chaos in everyone's lives. Use a learning diary, a process journal, or reflections to scaffold your work, because building this in helps you recognize how you're progressing. Look towards your learning community for peer reviews, practice sessions, brainstorms, role plays, and get together for discussions or use text groups such as WhatsApp to help each other out. If we consider specific barriers to motivation for our culturally and linguistically different students, we consider who are the members of these groups and how are they supporting or obstructing the learning? What are their specific roles and are these roles negotiable? Basically, it's about flexibility, variety, and communication. If there's inflexibility towards learners' options to respond, or a lack of social interaction, support, and guidance and help, that will reduce motivation and increase frustration. And for teacher engagement, for the teacher to expect the learner to engage, but to only give feedback at the end of a major work is another example. So teacher feedback needs to be timely, and a higher frequency of feedback, specifically at the beginning, shows an increase in engagement and motivation. If we work more on applying this, consider the learning curve. Learners who are new to the class LMS and tools and software are going to prefer tools with a easier, flatter learning curve. Ask learners if there's a lack of interaction, support, guidance, or help in any area of the course. Make sure you've got a variety and choice in activities. And make sure materials, content, products can all be accessible online and useful. So I cannot access the chat from here, but I was going to drop in a little job aid. So I think I will end there unless anyone has a question for now.
Yeah. So can you please elaborate how to motivate the barriers, right? As you have said, motivation for barriers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so for the barriers, how do I get back to my... Okay, so for barriers, if you're thinking of, if you're not being flexible and you're saying to your learners, you have to give me a 10-page paper every 2 weeks, and I need 6 papers by the end of the semester, and you're not allowing some flexibility or the change of deadlines, or perhaps some short answers and some long answers, that's definitely not going to help your learner. Also, if you're not telling them clearly what you want from them, and you're not giving them steps along the way to come back to you and ask as a teacher or as the course director to check how they're doing, like with formative assessments, that's also going to be a barrier to motivation. Does that help?
Yeah. And as you have said that the motivation for teachers, so like for students, what is it?
Okay, for students, some things that can really help you are if you work with your community. If you realize that you're not the only person who's going through the course, and maybe you've got the same questions that other students have. So that's one reason why it's good to reach out and create a community of learners. And then another thing that helps with motivation is the third point. If you use some sort of process to write down your ideas and see how you're going along and how you're progressing, looking back and seeing the work that you've done gives a real sense of engagement and motivation.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you.
So now we will move on to our next presentation. Miss Sarah. Yeah, hello ma'am.
Hello. Hi. Hello, everyone. Shall I share my PDF or PowerPoint? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, you can.
Either one. Okay. Let me get to it. Unfortunately, I have a lot of things open. Oh, PowerPoint is recommended. Thank you. I've lost my way to get back here. I'm coming. Hold on a second. I am coming. This is okay. This is it. Okay. I'm sorry, I use Teams a lot for work, so every time a chat pops up from another team here at Georgia Tech, I get a little bit of an interruption.
It's okay. Yeah, it's
So
okay.
So that's why it seems like there's a lot of things open on my desk. Is this showing now?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yep,
It's clear.
yes.
Just do. Okay, it is showing. Okay. Feel free to unmute and stop me at any time, anyone. We have such different presentations today. It's really kind of interesting to me. My application to apply to this symposium was to sort of further my idea that I want to continue to try to flip this paradigm that we have, which is letting international students speak for everyone, and making international students do all the learning and all the so-called change and adaptation. What I envision is that we start to take on a longer term view of how we add culture and language to our academic worlds, and that we make it, you know, universal. We don't just make it the international students' job. So what I wanted to talk to you today is about culture, identity, review intercultural competence theory, just very briefly, and then just how I see switching the paradigm from, in my world, international students do not equal culture, but a lot of the places I've been, that's kind of how it's looked at. So I'll see what you guys think later. And then creating a few incremental steps to this teaching process. Just a quick reminder, I'm using Deardorff's definition here of what intercultural competence is. I'm pretty certain that most of you are familiar with this. So I'll just show it to you briefly. Okay, so as I see it, the 21st century paradigm for developing intercultural competence is that we should be respectful, be open, and be curious, but you, as the international student, are the one that has to be respectful, open, and curious. Also, it's a process that never ends. If you're the international student or person, you're the one in charge of that. And I just don't think that covers everything. I think what's missing from this is one basic foundation of intercultural competence, which is the need to know ourselves as well, which is an unending process, right? It's a process that never ends. So we need to look at identity. We hear people talking about lenses, but I think they're using the word without understanding what even is meant by beneath the lens, the identity and the values associated with that, and how it changes with individual and social situations. So again, this group of researchers said if we do occupy multiple roles, or they say we do occupy multiple roles and wear multiple faces in a day, and we feel aspects of our identities that are salient in different situations, then shouldn't we have some training, all of us, not just the international person or student. And in one of my workshops, I had a series of lenses literally drop down in certain orders, and then they would switch around, and we used Obama as the person wearing them because that seemed logical. Our model at Georgia Tech, I just want to give you a little bit of a model of what's going on there. With international TAs, we do have a curriculum now directed towards international TAs. It is policy based from the university system of our state of Georgia, which means that it was probably an othering process that got us to this. But what is good about it is that we can support and get support from international TAs. It's a course, it's a credit course. We have included tasks that allow them to share their voices and use those voices again in the future through these same tasks. And we try to integrate into this part of the curriculum semester, following the semester they take the class, that they maybe go speak to the GT 6000, which is a get to know campus kind of a 1 credit hour course, and the GT 1000 course for undergraduate students. We also have some programming. I work in the Center for Teaching and Learning at Georgia Tech, and we have gotten some funding this past year, internal funding from grad studies, for what I call ITA liaisons for CETL, for the Center for Teaching and Learning. And it's a leadership initiative that we call the hub and spoke model. So we're at the center where they can gather and be, and we can hear their voices, and then they go out, and it's their voice that speaks to the school, the new TAs, gathers information, and we try to then create more programming based on that. Another thing that I'm just giving as an example is that we add those students we add to their plate the suggestion that maybe they present at Celebrating Teaching Day, which is a campus-wide event. And of course, it was online this past year, but now we know that there are going to be parts of it online in the future because they worked so well. And so that's a way that they got a lot of exposure. And they could do multimodal submissions too. So that's a really nice addition to our programming. Also, some of our programming has included alumni. We do have an alumni club on campus, and students have to pay $10 a year to be involved in it. It's because it's really great networking, and a lot of them do. But we advocated for international students that let's give them a little break and let them be a part of that for free the first semester. And then if they want to follow up, they can keep going to be a part of it. Now, that's our model for training ITAs. This is our model for training everyone else. Non-international students, non-international faculty. As you can see, it's a pretty blank slate. So I've written in here, because what we call culture can feel invisible to those who share the same culture with most people around them, and this is the research group cited there. This is why I feel it's so important to shift this paradigm a little bit and include, not to change the paradigm, but to include the other side, so to speak. And I think it's got to be incremental changes. You know, this is nothing that happens fast. It certainly doesn't happen overnight. It's absolutely an ongoing process, and you know, it's hard to see, but visibility is key. The 4 suggestions I have are to find your stakeholders, ride the waves, and I'll tell you what I mean with that. Begin with workshop programming, and I'm in a Center for Teaching and Learning, but previous to that, I was at another institute in Georgia for 10 years in the faculty department of applied linguistics and ESL. So I taught some undergraduate and graduate courses in intercultural communication. So I've done more curricular things than workshop things. And now at CETL, I'm doing more workshop programming, which is a great way to start. And then add curricular components as possible. If anybody wants to stop, please feel free to say something. Finding the stakeholders and riding the waves. Stakeholders are all over campus, and they're outside of campus too. I think that people forget that you can find them, you know, walking your dog or riding your skateboard or whatever. You know, don't be afraid to talk to people. Riding the waves of DEI, internationalization, and sustainability. We had a wonderful workshop on sustainable development goals by the UN. That's why I have this particular symbol here. And there's a lot of crossover there. And there's also a lot of crossover with internationalization. If you can get on an internationalization committee, it's a great place to raise the discussion to people that it shouldn't just be the international student's job. And don't forget that there are fun places that people meet, and we can have dialogues after, during, before that, that are facilitated, that create the moments for international students to not have to be the only stakeholders in this. Now, even in the study of STEM, and that's the institute I'm in, is a major STEM institute, Georgia Tech. So we've had some CETL programming workshops for identity discovery. Now these workshops, I am trying to get them so that they become, you know, a series of workshops, not just one, because as we know, the one-time thing that's what I don't want people to think they can do. We have created some identity discovery workshops for TAs that work with us. That's been a whole lot of fun. That's based on an ethnographic course that I used to teach at my previous institution. Oh. Yep. Did you have a question?
I didn't. I kind of know, but.
Okay, what? Oh, sorry. Okay. simulations and games, I just added some simple ones there, but those are things that could be added as well. Now, curricular components, internationalization conversations are really important. We are also having we have the GTOMS program, which is, growing.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, sorry to interrupt, ma'am. Yeah,
Sorry.
Mr. Joel, yeah, it will be appreciated if you can turn off your mic, please.
That's okay. Thank you. Excuse me, our OMS program, the online master's program, is, thousands of students now, and they have happily come to CETL with some requests for working with international students and international TAs. So that's how I originally got to this symposium, and I was really excited about it. So we're creating some Canvas modules, and I have been able to talk to those TAs face-to-face on the computer. And they were really excited to be included in that conversation about what we should include in training. And a lot of it is effective communication from the other side and their side. It's really not a one-sided process, as I think a lot of us do already know. But the international TAs will have their own training here, and there will be some that are required and some that are optional, but there'll be resources for the future. So we're excited about where that's going and where that might lead our conversations in the future, particularly, again, with the internationalization committees. The next two slides are an example of the content from a workshop for TAs in our Center for Teaching and Learning's GT Fellows program, which are seasoned TAs who are maybe in their third or fourth year of study. And you can see objectives, and then you can see the circles of identity, which I originally took from the University of Minnesota's program years ago. And down here on the bottom right, you can see identities and values that might be associated with those. And then on the next page, what we do is we try to relate those to teaching spaces. Which identities do you hope to bring to teaching spaces? Which ones do you hope to leave out? And then thinking about other professors, their TAs, maybe what do they think those people bring to the teaching spaces or try to leave out? And then we talk about, a lot of things come up in those dialogues. And we go into wearing our lenses. This is such a big onion to peel apart. So, I'll end on that. And if you have any questions, please, I'll be happy to entertain them. We'll stop sharing.
Yeah, ma'am, as you have said that we have to remove the barrier between the international student and intercultural differences, right? So
Yes.
what are the practical approach for that?
Sorry, I have my tomato timer on.
Yeah.
What are the, say that again, what are the practical?
What are the practical approaches? Yeah.
For, okay, right.
To deal with that barrier.
Yeah, so for example, and this is where I say it has to be incremental, very, very incremental steps. Because most people that I have approached in the past, they say to me, oh, it's like swimming. You throw the person into the water and they learn to swim, right? Well, we know that that isn't the way it works with intercultural communication. What happens is a lot of conflict results. So this, for example, the workshop that I was showing the slides from, those are for TAs who are not international TAs. There might be one or two international TAs in that group, but they are from the US or Canada, and they are TAs who've never really thought about taking this step to meet the other side, because they're on their native speaker, soil. That's where they are. So once they get into this practice of looking at their own identities and realizing that it changes even with other native speakers, then what we're doing is we're just taking that incremental step to give them some awareness. It's raising awareness. And that's one example. Now, we would also do that with faculty. I'm hoping to be given a really good chance to do that with a 2-workshop series with faculty. But again, it's really just starting the conversation in that way. Another one is we're working on doing a linguistic variation, working with students and talking about linguistic variation for faculty at Georgia Tech, because I've encountered, as we all have, right, a little bit of usage of terms that I don't want students to be called. We're trying to put together something that not only shows what linguistic variation is, linguistic diversity, but that it's a part of the DEI conversation. It's a part of internationalization. It's a part of asset-based international TA proficiencies. And yeah, I hope those are 2 good examples.
Yeah, perfect. Anyone who has any doubt, yeah, they can ask them. Anyone having any doubts?
Any questions, any ideas? Is anything overlap here?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of overlap with not only myself as a Anglophone student in Montreal in Canada, and I'm studying in an English language university, but everything around us is Francophone. And I just really enjoyed your the culture quote that says, like, a lot of culture can be invisible until it's sort of made visible. And I really like your approach and how you're creating workshops and unpacking it and into activities and exercises that really make people, as you say, from the host culture, examine like what they're putting out there and what they're not putting out there. It was very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for that. You know, that's the perfect word, unpacking. And it's an unending unpacking, right? We, as interculturalists, we always say, there's no end to this. We're always unpacking this.
Totally.
So I know that to our students, sometimes they go, oh no. And I'm like, no, but it becomes fun after a while.
Yeah, you start enjoying the differences and the nuances and the complexities. I was in a meeting last night, and 2 ladies in the meeting from an Asian background said, they were like, oh, but that's such a British colonial thing. And I was like, what? But I'm from Africa. And then I'm like, oh yeah, hang on, I'm from a British colony. Okay, you ladies have to explain this to me. So yes, you're totally right. It's an unpacking.
Yeah. What a great example. And what a great example too, because we want to be gentle. You know, I want to put in every other slide, I wanted to put this be gentle flasher, you know, because everybody, we all make mistakes, you know, and we all don't know because it's the air we breathe. And so when we're told something like that, we go, what? That can't be, what? I'm so, you know, and as long as the people are gentle and showing you how they see it, it's a nice learning experience for everybody. It's a great example, though. Do I have is there a hand?
Yeah, I'll just jump in. We're a small enough group. So it's kind of interesting because I'm an Anglo from Quebec, but I now live in Saskatchewan. So I know some of the complexity of a Canadian context. But I appreciate your notion of approaching things with gentleness. And I think part of that is modeling and sharing with students how you understand yourself as a learner and a person as well, and sort of going through that deconstruction process for students, using yourself as an example. That was an activity that I would do in my former life as an international baccalaureate teacher. So it's something that I've sort of carried on into my new life as someone who's in a post-secondary context. But I am curious as to whether or not researchers are starting to think about how different forms of social media are helping to push this conversation forward as well. So for instance, on Reels through Facebook and, TikTok and all this kind of stuff, some of the stuff that comes up through my algorithms are things to do with notions of identity. And in Canada, for instance, we're going through a process of truth and reconciliation with our Indigenous population. And so seeing how those voices are presented in social media and gaining a much broader audience that was previously not afforded in mainstream media. I can't help but wonder if this is going to contribute to greater awareness of the diversity of voices in a Canadian context, for instance, or if we're going to start seeing greater fragmentation in terms of people only consuming the media that is of interest to them. So not really a question, but just sort of putting that thought out there in terms of how we might make use or understand social media as part of this intercultural communication understanding.
Does anybody else have something to say? That's really it's such a good question, and it's very difficult for me to think about. It kind of overwhelms me because I worry, that, like you say, your algorithms are yours and mine are mine, and are these things not even hitting other people? That concerns me. And however, I do believe in the power of story and how it's gotten out there. So I think there are both sides here. Some positives and some challenges. So that's what I'll say. I'll let somebody else jump in there.
And ma'am, how to deal with two students or like two gentlemen who are having their intercultural differences, like in their opinion?
Do you have a specific example?
Like if someone say that my culture has these things, and if another person or another guy says that no, in our culture it is not it is not good to follow this. So how to deal with that situation?
Oh, but you're both from the same national.
Both are from different. Yeah, both are from different culture.
If you're from the same national culture, you might. This is where identity and individual and social culture and individual identities are so great to study, because you can be from the same place and have completely different beliefs and values, right? So unpacking, part of the unpacking is there's regionalism, there are varieties of ethnicities, there are linguistic communities. There is no way to say there's a blanket statement about anything. So that becomes a fundamental piece of knowledge as well, which helps undo not only generalizations, but of course stereotypes. So we can have differing opinions, but then the not right, and if you're from different places and you say you do this and the other person says you're wrong for doing that, we need to start at the beginning, because once you come to a place of at least partial understanding, we realize, there's not exactly a right or a wrong, there's just a difference. So how to handle that, it's really unique to the situation. Here I am in Georgia in the South, so you guys may have seen us on the news a little bit recently. It's really hard. It's really, there's a lot of conflict that can result from that kind of comment from a person. I know I didn't answer your question, but without a real specific instance, it would be difficult to.
Yeah, it is quite related. Yeah.
to be too specific, yeah. But we are teaching, like in the online master's system, we are trying to put into that Canvas training module some ways, you know, this is what I understood the TA to say, and we had some conflict, you know, we had some conflict with someone talking about COVID and where it came from. And while I believe in the intentions were absolutely not what happened, it still created a lot of conflict. So we had to go in and say, okay, is this what you meant? And actual language to use in those situations. Here's what I heard you say, and here's why I feel like it's really something that we need to talk about. So we're trying to do that in the online spaces. And as Jill said, with the that's a really, it's kind of hard. Let me tell you, that is why I'm enjoying all the conversations on this symposium, because moving that dialogue from a face-to-face setting for me is difficult, and the challenge is wondering if we're getting all the pragmatics, if we're getting all the nuance in there that we need to.
And I think there's this added complexity as well, because we are working in incredibly privileged spaces. We're working in, I think most of us in educational spaces, a lot of us mainly in post-secondary spaces. And so that's the context in which we are engaging with international students. And yet, once they leave campus, what are some of the things that they are encountering? And that's going to be, I think, so dependent on the place that they're in, if they're not an online student, for instance. So it might be that the university itself is very warm, welcoming, has all these different supports, has a very strong focus on a dual pathway for intercultural communication. And yet when someone's on the bus going home, they might encounter these really horrific, overt racist remarks or encounter microaggressions. And so I wonder sometimes if that off-campus experience is not really well considered in the research, and how to help students navigate that. Because, again, we can only sort of control what, and even that control is often illusionary and limited in terms of the campus or that learning environment, and not so much the surrounding area. And not all universities are in highly multicultural spaces. So a place like Toronto or Montreal, Vancouver, just drawing on some Canadian context, just by their nature, their makeup, are very, very multicultural and have been for many decades. But in whiter places, shall we say, that diversity is less apparent, and international students might account for a majority of that visible diversity in smaller communities or wider communities. So I often wonder about that experience that's happening off campus as well.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And honestly, that's one of the things that pushes me to really want to incorporate training from the host culture, from the roots to everyone, because I feel like that will help it seep out into the world in a better way. Yeah, and for sure that is happening, obviously, in Georgia a lot. What you were saying, I mean. Are we over time? Happy, are you?
No, we are not over time. Yeah. If anyone has any questions, yeah, you can ask them.
Oh. Christine, are you in Brazil?
Yes, I'm in Brazil.
Okay. I didn't realize you were in Brazil. That's great. I would like to ask Quentin, you had the online discussion environment. Did you say which LMS you're using?
Oh, well, we're using Moodle at Concordia.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
Does it work okay? I mean, do you like that platform itself?
I mean, like in my previous work, when I was working as an international educator, I was like a technology leader and I used Moodle for one LMS. And then that was like fast forward 10 years on to moving to Montreal and coming here and using Moodle as a learner. And I just don't see that they've changed much. Like they haven't added modalities or multiple options or, you know, I would have imagined after 10 years there would be some connectivity with social media or, you know.
Yeah.
So like part of my presentation was almost like, oh, we need something else, not an LMS that literally just allows you to upload a JPEG and a PowerPoint and link to a video. You know, there needs to be a bit more flexibility of communication or a fluidity of content.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I see, I've only used Moodle for about a year and a half.
Okay.
In a different situation, but I see Jill says they switched to Canvas
Yeah.
while also using Blackboard. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the timing was not great, but that was what was scheduled, and they said we'll continue. Blackboard was terrible, so I'm very glad we moved to Canvas, and I jumped on that because I said if I'm teaching online, I'm going to use Canvas. I'm not using Blackboard because Blackboard, from my perspective, it was just a storage space. It wasn't a course space.
So it just lets you upload stuff and that's it. So it's not very useful or interactive.
I found that Blackboard was just not user friendly. I've used so many different LMS systems over the years. I've used Moodle. I've used Google Classroom. If I had my choice, I'd probably opt for Google Classroom, but that's a choice that's out of my hand. But I find that Canvas is, I just find it's easy to use, both from an instructor and a student perspective. Because I've taken online courses in different contexts, and I found that it was easy to navigate when I was a learner as well.
Okay.
Here in Brazil, Sarah, we are much used the Moodle, and last year most of the federal institutions started to use the Google Suite. So we are now using Classroom and a sort of tools that help in the classroom.
Okay. That's interesting. We're using Canvas now at Georgia Tech also, and Emory University is in Atlanta. They use Canvas. State uses iCollege, and it was called Desire to Learn for a while. I agree, like Happy, I liked Blackboard in the sense that it just, you know, to me, Blackboard was like the original thing, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and wilder and so difficult for me to navigate. But it does do a lot. I get that part, but it was like Canvas kind of took all of that and just put it in a better interface.
I just used Canva once. I feel more comfortable with Moodle, and my team used it to develop some plugins to the Moodle. So we are very familiar with this tool.
I can't imagine changing during the pandemic to that would be horrible.
Yeah.
Just too much.
Just the communication.
Doodle and Canvas have more flexibility, right? Has more flexibility.
Blackboard does, or Google?
Canvas and Doodle.
Oh yeah. You know, it's interesting too, because like at Georgia Tech, we clearly use Microsoft Teams, as I told you before, but so we're Microsoft, but they don't sanction anything with Google. So even Google Docs we're not supposed to use. Can you believe that? So, so it's really so individual to the university or to the system.
I
mean-
can imagine, Sarah, just because in Brazil about 5 years ago, our government decided that the most of federal institutions have to use free software. So it's very difficult for us to use something that like Google or like Microsoft, just because we are not allowed to use here. We have to prioritize the free software.
Yeah. Christine, this was for inclusive practices. It was to make sure everyone has access.
Yes, and for us, thinking about openness nowadays, it's very important. But some time ago, no, it's a breakout. We are use it to work and no more.
Okay.
Just because we our institution don't have budget to afford the license of these products. So the government prioritized the free ones.
Yeah.
It is what, you know, financial security of an institution does. I, as a state employee, being at Georgia Tech, having come from Georgia State, Georgia State is very much the like you can't, they have a different LMS even, and Georgia Tech has Canvas. So it's really fascinating to me that everybody is, now I'm in this even more privileged situation is what I'm trying to say, where we're using the greater system, and it does cost money, but as you say, like we don't realize what it might cost the students to have the certain type of instrument or wherever they are. And a lot of my students in China told me that they were having to use their VPN for Microsoft Teams. So we were all saying, well, why are Georgia Tech's people using Microsoft Teams instead of our other system, which is called Blue Jeans? It's not even Zoom. But professors kept using it, and that's another moment where I think that privilege is unexamined at the local level, But yeah, it's moving from a lower financially secure institution to a more secure one is really such a learning curve in what the money can do for you. Sadly, you want it all to be equal.
Yeah, I've worked at several different institutions over the years, and the culture shock sometimes is notable in terms of, what do you mean we have money for this? Right. Or yeah. Sometimes it's even more surprising the reverse. Why don't we have money for this? Like, this was something that was very valued in the previous organization. So it's it's always a bit of an adjustment, regardless of whether you're going from a plate to a more privileged space or a less privileged space.
I remember when someone printed something in color copies for a meeting at the first time, and I was like, did you mean to print this in color? And she said, yeah, how else would you see the graph? And I was like, oh, we didn't even have a color copier in our entire building at my other place. So, and we wouldn't.
I once worked at an institution where we had to receive administrative approval before we could make photocopies.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Public schools are kind of like that now.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. Yeah, Google Meet. I know Google is great. It's just, I guess, techs, because it's a STEM university, like their technological agreements are really purposeful and specific. So it is funny, happy. And a lot of students use it anyway, but it's not sanctioned. And the things like Slack, you know, some professors will have a Slack channel or a this or that or the other. I just feel sorry for students, because I say, why do you, you know, they might have 3 places that they find something for one course and 3 different places for another course. It seems to be a lot to keep up with, especially in the online learning world. To me, I think we're taxing them, you know, just to use executive function to move from one, you know, system to the next all the time. So Discord, yep, people are using Discord as well.
Yeah, this thing about the learning curve and overloading learners with different softwares and apps they need to download and use, it's a big thing, you know. Like, even I just completed a distance ed course, and it was part of our job as learners to go through and get a whole sort of encyclopedia of tools that we could use. And sort of 3/4 of the way through, I was like, okay, I've looked at 30 tools and apps, and now there's just too much choice.
Oh my gosh, 30. Can you believe it? I mean,
I get the sense behind it. It was to give us a toolbox and like a toolkit of multiple apps, but it was a lot to go through, you know, and to try and figure out what's good for what purpose or what level. And
I mean, students have to deal with whatever their professors say deal with. So, you know, you as one professor might have one set of favorite tools, and then the other one has the other favorite tools. I could get on a soapbox about that. Email, Teams, Canvas, that's enough. It's not enough, but you know, I feel like there should be a limit. So it is a lot for students to keep up with. And then when their laptop breaks or something, you know, they can do very little. And international students, I've had several who just, you know, had total meltdowns because their laptop broke. Of course, would melt down, because you can't even find a place to go get your laptop fixed if your laptop is broken.
Yeah.
So, you know, there have to be some community connections.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we are done now.
Well, we're at the end. Are we happy?
Sorry?
Have we finished the discussion time?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Fine.
Well, I'll just drop the first link if you want to click on that and grab a copy. It's a job aid from the presentation that I did, and it separates it into the 3 groups: teachers, course designers, and learners. And then if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, please do. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Likewise, me too. Oh, that's great. I will reach. That's a good idea to get people to reach you on LinkedIn. That's an easier way to touch base.
Yeah, I think so. So please connect. Happy, thank you very much for moderating for us.
Yes. You guys are doing such a great job.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, where are you in? Are you in Canada also?
No, I'm in India.
You're in India?
Hey, cool, man.
Awesome. It's amazing. We have Brazil, India. Oh my gosh. Well, take care, everybody, and thank you so much.
Yeah, take care, everybody. Take care.
Bye, Christine.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. You too.